Okay, guys, this video is going to be used to help you create your essay comparing and contrasting ancient Athens and ancient Sparta. Now, I know I just said the word essay, and a lot of you were like, "No, no, essay! We just were writing something else. We just wrote a myth. How could we just wrote a myth? How could we write an essay too?" However, it's okay. Calm down. I will be helping you with each of your 3 points, showing how Athens and Sparta are similar and different. You're going to want to take note of this because the 3 areas that you're going to identify Athens and Sparta as different are in terms of their government. Let me use my little highlighting tool here. Like my highlighting tool is pretty cool. In terms of their government, it's different. The focus of the two city states is different, and the role of women are different in the two city states. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to give you I'm also going to show how Athens and Sparta are similar in 3 ways. Okay? I'll also show you how to do that. And then once I'm done showing you that, you will be like, yay, awesome. I got an A. Yeah, I'm figuring out the new tools in Screencastify. Kind of cool. Anyway, I digress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we're going to create this essay. I'm going to read to you a little bit about Athens and Sparta today. As I'm reading, I'm going to be kind of giving you a wink, wink, nudge, nudge when I get to each one of these 3 main points. So listen carefully for that. The first city-state that we're going to be reading about is Sparta. And I'm going to be reading this to you, as opposed to you reading it from the textbook. Okay? So again, you don't have to be like, no, Mr. Z, I can't read so much. This is not reading classes. This is not English class. It's social studies class. It's okay, panicking student, because I am going to be reading this to you. So you can sit back and listen to me read to you a little bit about Sparta from our textbook today. And we're going to be starting off at the top here. I think this is kind of cool. So stop making fun of me. I like it. Anyway, okay. Back to our text. Sparta. The Spartans focused on military skills to control the people they conquered. This is Sparta. What would it be like to leave home when you were only 7? Read to learn how Spartan boys faced this challenge. As you read in the last section, Sparta was founded by the Dorians, Greeks who invaded the Peloponnesus in the Dark Age. Like other city-states, Sparta needed more land as it grew, but its people did not set up colonies. Instead, they conquered and enslaved their neighbors. The Spartans called their captive workers helots. This name comes from the Greek word capture. So basically, they realized they needed a little bit more land. Just to show you a map of where Sparta is located here on the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Sparta was on the southern end. On the end of the Balkan Peninsula, we have Athens. We'll be talking about them next. Not too far away from each other. Sparta, in terms of its land mass, was bigger. And what they did was their neighbors early on, they just kind of conquered them, overtook them, and then put them to work for them. And that's what the helots were. As you're going to see, military was extremely important for, as you already probably knew, for the city-state of Sparta. Excuse me. Why was the military so important? Spartans feared that the helots might someday rebel. As a result, the government firmly controlled the people of Sparta and trained the boys and men for war. At age 7, boys left their family to live in barracks, like military barracks. They were harshly treated to make them tough. The Greek historian Plutarch describes life for Spartan boys. After they were 12 years old, they were no longer allowed to wear any undergarment. They had one coat to serve them a year. They lodged together in little bands upon beds made of reed grasses, which they were to break off with their hands without a knife. Other things that young Spartan boys that would do is sometimes they would have them, go in extremely long periods of time without any food. or put them in a situation where they had little to no clothes in an environment that would have been very cold. So they did all these kinds of things to really toughen them up. Oftentimes, young boys would even die through this process because they were they were trained so hard for war, and it was really seen that if they died through the training, well, that was just as well because they couldn't handle it, and they didn't deserve to be Spartan. So extremely harsh environment that the young boys would be um, subjected to, starting even at the age of 7. At age 20, Spartan men entered the regular army. The men remained in military barracks for more than 10 years. They ate all their meals in dining halls with other soldiers. A typical meal was a vile tasting dish called black broth, pork boiled in animal blood, salt, and vinegar. Again, they didn't want them to be too content with the food. They wanted to make things as difficult as possible at all times. Spartans returned home at age 30, but stayed in the army until age 60. So, for those of you keeping track, Spartan boys began to train at 7, and they had military responsibilities up until the age of 60. So, for the large majority of their entire life, they continued to train for combat. They expected to either win on the battlefield or die, but never to surrender. One Spartan mother ordered her son to, quote, come home carrying your shield or being carried on it. Girls in Sparta were trained in sports, running, wrestling, and throwing the javelin. They kept fit to become healthy mothers. Wives lived at home while their husbands lived in the barracks. As a result, Spartan women were freer than other Greek women. They could own property and they could go where they wanted. So it was seen for females in Sparta, it was very important to stay physically fit. And the idea was that if you were a female, if you were physically fit, you would have a physically fit child someday. And even the process of, when babies were born, they were inspected very closely. And as you'll see in a video that I posted, if there seemed to be any abnormalities at all with the child, or they didn't seem to be extremely fit, they would often be left to die. What was Sparta's government like? The Spartan government was an oligarchy. Two kings headed a council of elders. The council, which included 28 citizens over age 60, presented laws to an assembly. All Spartan men over the age of 30 belonged to the assembly. They voted on the council's laws and chose 5 people to be ephors each year. The ephors enforced the laws and managed tax collection. To keep anyone from questioning the Spartan system, the government discouraged foreign visitors. It also banned travel abroad for any reason but military ones. It even frowned upon citizens who studied literature or the arts. The Spartans succeeded in keeping control over the Helots for nearly 250 years. However, by focusing on military training, the Spartans left behind other Greeks in trade. They also knew less about science and other subjects. However, their soldiers were especially strong and swift. Spartans would play a key role in defending Greece. So much like our city state project that we worked on previously, even though the Spartans focused on military strength, since there was such a drive and a focus, other things suffered, such as trade and arts and crafts, being able to create something um, to make a sustainable income. Things weren't really done outside of um, warfare and fighting and getting ready for war. A couple things to highlight about Sparta that I just read that you might be having come up a little bit later if you're still paying attention. First of all, here in Sparta, the government that was an oligarchy, an oligarchy, an oligarchy was a ruling by 2 kings and a council. And here's your spelling of oligarchy. Sorry. Don't mean to make anybody dizzy here. Yes. Boom. All right. Was an oligarchy. And one of the interesting things about it being a two king system, if you're wondering why that is because if there was a decision that needed to be made and King A, let's say, wanted to go to war and King B did not, then they weren't going to war. It was kind of a checks and balances system. So you couldn't just you had to both be in agreement on those kinds of decisions. The other part is focus. The focus in Sparta, as you obviously just saw, was military, right? Boys would leave at age 7, and they were really involved in the military and to some degree until about the age 60. Role of women. Women in Spartan society were encouraged to be physically fit. And it was seen to be physically fit was important because if the more physically fit you were, the greater the chance that you had to have a physically fit child, and that physically fit child would then further help the city state of Sparta. Um, okay, so that kind of wraps up Sparta. I gave you your 3 points. The next city state we're going to look at is Athens. Unlike Spartans, Athenians, or people from Athens, were more interested in building a democracy than building a military force. When visiting a new city, does everything feel strange to you? Spartans who visited Athens probably felt the same way. Read to find out why. Athens lay northeast of Sparta, at least a 2-day trip away. The city states were also miles apart in their values and systems of government. I think I showed you the map earlier. You can see that they are not too far away from each other, about 2 days travel at this time period. So in the same general area, but very, very different in terms of how they decided to run their city states. What was like life? What was life like? I'm sorry. What was life in Athens like? Athenian citizens raised their children very differently from Spartans. In Athenian schools, one teacher taught boys to read, write, and do arithmetic. Another teacher taught them sports. A third teacher taught them to sing and to play a stringed instrument called the lyre. This kind of education created well rounded Athenians with good minds and bodies. At age 18, boys finished school and became citizens. So the focus here is see what I did there? Here's focus and the focus. Anyway, so the focus here for the people of Athens, the focus was on education. Remember, the focus in Sparta was on military. That answers one of your points back in your essay here, right? The focus here in Sparta was military. The focus here in Athens was on education. Athenian girls stayed at home. Their mothers taught them spinning, weaving, and other household duties. Only in some wealthy families did girls learn to read, write, and play the lyre. When they married, women stayed at home to keep house and to teach their own daughters. So the role of women was very different. Here, remember, the role of women in Sparta was to be physically fit, and preparing yourself and your body, getting ready for childbirth and having children that were very healthy, and then for the ultimate goal of serving in the military for Sparta. Here, the role of women in Athens was very different. They took on more, quote, traditional household roles, such as, whether it was keeping a house clean, raising the children, educating the young girls at times. But the focus was much different than the focus of women in Sparta. And also, when you think about it, remember, men were away um, in Sparta serving the military much of their lives. So the women in Sparta were really much more on their own. than the women in Athens. The women in Athens would have still had their family around a lot of the time because they didn't have, the men weren't serving in the military until the age of 60 like they were in Sparta. A budding democracy. Early Athens, like other city states, was ruled by land-owning nobles during the 600s BC. An assembly of all citizens existed, but it had few powers. Actually, the government was an oligarchy, as in Sparta. That's how it started. Around 600 BC, the Athenians began to rebel against the nobles. Most farmers owed the nobles money, and many sold themselves into slavery to pay for debts. Over and over, farmers demanded an end to all debts. In 594 BC, the nobles turned to one man both sides trusted, a noble named Solon. Solon canceled all the farmers' debts and he freed those who had become slaves. He also allowed all male citizens to participate in the assembly and law courts. A council of 400 wealthy citizens wrote the laws, but the assembly had to pass them. Solon's reforms were popular among the common people. However, the farmers continued to press Solon to give away the wealthy noble's land. This he refused to do. After Solon, there were 30 years of turmoil. Finally, a tyrant named Pis- uh, Pisistratus seized power in 560 BC and won the support of the poor by dividing large estates among landless farmers. He also loaned money to the poor and gave them jobs building temples and other public works. The most important leader after Persiceus died was Clisthenes. When he came to power in 508 BC, he recognized the assembly to play the central role in governing. As before, all male citizens could belong to the assembly and vote on laws. However, members had new powers. They could debate matters openly, hear court cases, and appoint army generals. Most importantly, Clisthenes recreated a new council of 500 citizens to help the assembly carry out daily business. The council proposed laws, dealt with foreign countries, and oversaw the treasury. Athenians chose the members of the council each year in a lottery. They believed the system was fairer than an election, which might favor the rich. Clisthenes' reforms did not bring all Athenians into the political process. Non citizens, which included all women, foreign born men, and slaves, were still excluded. Nonetheless, Clisthenes is credited with making the government of Athens a democracy. So, as we learned about in our previous video, democracy, the word uh, demo, or comes from a Greek word demos, meaning people, and krasi refers to uh, leadership. So it's literally the leadership or the ruling of the people. So this is the first time we see a democracy. Now it had its limitations, right? So for example, if you were not a citizen, you weren't allowed to be a part of government. Women were not allowed to be a part of government. If you were foreign born, if you were slaves, none of these people could be a part of government. But it's interesting to note that it's going to be, no longer are we do we have governing bodies of, kings and queens and tyrants, but instead people are voting for who they want to have involved in their government. And they want those people involved because they think they're going to do a good job leading for them being the people, which they didn't have that kind of trust with the kings. So going back to our essays, we've learned a little bit about Athens and Greece here as kind of a review. I'll use I just think it's a cool tool. All right, so the government in Athens is democracy. That's right. The government in Sparta is oligarchy. Very good. Next, the focus in Athens was upon education. Very good. And the focus in Sparta is on military. Athenian women took on more traditional household roles, whether it was cleaning or taking care of a home or taking care of the children, educating the young women. And the role of the women in Sparta was primarily for fitness, physical fitness, and making sure that you were in good shape to give birth to children that would be able to serve then in the military. Now, there's some things that are similar between Athens and Sparta. Here are some similarities. First of all, in Athens and Sparta, they were the two most powerful city states of their time. They were the two most powerful city states of their time. The second thing that was similar about both Athens and Sparta is that they both spoke Greek. They both spoke Greek. So the Greek language was spoken and written by both Athens and Sparta. Remember, they were very close together. And then lastly, even though they had different governments, they did not allow for um, slaves, women, and non-citizens to be a part of government. Again, they did not allow for slaves, or women, or non-citizens to be a part of government. Okay. So hopefully I've helped you with some of your fears that you might have in creating this essay. Once we get all of our points written down here, I'll be discussing in part 2 how to actually create our essay. And hopefully you'll find that that video is helping you, that will be helpful for you to do that. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask me.